All right, everybody, let's take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. Crazy day in the crypto world. Hello and welcome everybody to the Crypto Mining Show, your one-stop shop for all cryptocurrency news from the perspective of a cryptocurrency miner. The weekly live stream is changing a little bit as the coverage of daily news topics is being handled by my new series Blocks, which is covering all of these same similar topics as quickly as possible. So if that's what you're interested in, you can always make sure that you're subbed so you check those out and get them going. That does mean that we aren't covering or double covering as many topics as we used to. And if that was a problem that you're having previously, don't worry, that is no longer an issue. That does mean today we are going to be covering a few more topics that are off the beaten path because frankly, we've covered a lot of the large topics already this week. But at the end of the show, we can go ahead and cover any questions or answers you may have surrounding any of the topics we covered earlier in the week. So stay tuned for that. Today, we're going to be talking about Coinbase pausing staking in California, New Jersey, South Carolina, and Wisconsin. Surprisingly, Wisconsin popping out to me there. We're also going to be talking about Bitwise's spot Bitcoin ETF refiling. Of course, there are a ton of refilings going on thanks to the SSA with Coinbase and the NASDAQ, making it just that much more closer to becoming a reality across the board as far as ETFs for Bitcoin. And we're going to talk briefly about Charles Schwab announcing their data breach and just a quick overview in case anybody is affected by that. So you're alive and aware of it so you can make any necessary changes that you need to. And then we're also going to be talking about the Chinese GPU maker receiving an investment to develop OpenCL and CUDA compatible chips to tackle NVIDIA. Pretty excited about that one from a perspective of getting cheaper hardware. There is a new 4060 on the horizon as well, and it is a half-height GPU. This one obviously is targeted at the mini ITX guys, but from a mining perspective, these could slot into server cases quite nicely. So it's something to maybe take into account when building out that new proof of useful work rig. We're also going to be talking about the price drops on the Intel Arc A750. And we have some new leaks for the RX 7800 and 7700 GPUs from Radeon, AMD. I am really hoping that this one in particular is going to be good for mining, thanks to primarily, of course, its bus width, because I like big buses and I cannot lie. Osprey has a new firmware coming out for the E300 and is running a new promo code that will take $300 off of your purchase for the E300. You can check out that promo code down in the description below. I am not sponsored by them, but we do have a promo code for them, so I'll share that for you guys if you're looking for savings anywhere. We're going to be taking a look at the profitability for that particular unit and then covering things like, the massive amount of hash rate that's coming on to not only the Bitcoin network, but the Caspa network. And then we'll talk about ASIC mining profitability and the profitability of my mining farm at the end of this. Before we get into it, here's a word from today's sponsor. Today's sponsor is BT Miners. BT Miners has been a longtime sponsor of the channel and a proven reliable source for ASIC miners. If you're looking to purchase ASIC hardware from Bitcoin to Dogecoin miners, they are available for purchase on bt-miners.com. BT Miners is a trusted source by both ASICminervalue.com and cryptominer.com. Follow the affiliate link in the description and tell them SOT sent you to support the channel. And welcome back. So let's go ahead and hop into the first normal topic for the day. Not very many of these left over, but Coinbase is to pause staking in California, New Jersey, South Carolina, and Wisconsin. The SEC filed a lawsuit last month against the crypto exchange, alleging that its retail staking service constitutes a security. Crypto exchange Coinbase is pausing its retail staking service in California, New Jersey, South Carolina, and Wisconsin after those states said they would require changes to those services while its proceedings against such staking services move forward. Crypto staked before the orders were issued will remain unaffected. The SEC filed a lawsuit against Coinbase last month, classifying its staking service as well as several of the tokens it lists as securities. That same day, securities agencies in 10 states started their own proceedings against Coinbase. Quote, "We strongly disagree with any allegation that our staking services are securities," end quote, Coinbase wrote in a blog post Friday afternoon. "But we will fully comply with the preliminary state orders where required, even though that comes before we've had an opportunity to defend ourselves." Now, we've been talking about the issue of securities in cryptocurrency for quite some time now. You guys might not be familiar with my position completely, so I'll just state it once again. You know, you call a spade, but don't take my spade away from me. I think to a certain extent here, when we talk about, you know, the specific Coinbase offerings of their staking services, depending on how that plays out with the Howey method and all of that, it could be considered a security. What is pretty much guaranteed to be a security across the board, though, is going to be anything along the lines of Ethereum, for example, where we saw a lot of that VC funding come in early on with Ethereum, and it was basically essentially set up specifically to profit off of the work of the developers. And the further the development of Ethereum moves into a more centralized state, like we talked about earlier this week on the blocks episodes, the closer we get to it being basically, in my humble opinion, a security without a doubt. And I'd like to hear your thoughts and opinions on that in the comment section down below, as well as the live chat. I know there's a lot of contention surrounding this between, you know, the ETH heads and the Bitcoin maximalists, but really what separates, from my perspective, most cryptocurrencies between a commodity and a security is whether the actual consensus mechanism is going to be proof of stake or proof of work, with proof of stake more than likely in most cases across the board being able to be slotted in as a security, and most cases in proof of work being able to be a commodity. Now, there are, of course, differences within different cryptocurrencies in both of those categories that may result in different findings, and that is definitely can be the case. It's just, if I look at it completely objectively, that's how I can kind of draw a line at where I think this might sit. Now, the biggest revelation here most recently was XRP, or Ripple, not being deemed a security for sales to the general public. That being said, of course, it's important to note that the institutional sales were considered still a security. We've yet to find out if that's going to be applied to public exchanges as well. But as it sits, there's a little bit of a miscommunication, I think, between what the crypto market is seeing with the recent ruling on Ripple and what the actual case is. So I wanted to bring that up because I think there's still some misconceptions. Obviously, it's fun to meme about like Ripple not being a security, but we also have to take into account last week when I was doing the live show here, I did go out afterwards on my locals page and talk about how I was purchasing some Ripple. And the reason for purchasing some Ripple was because what has been basically brought to light is that Ripple has a bunch of partnerships with the FedNow payment system. And so it behooves anybody that's working within the government and on the FedNow payment system for them to not basically brand that as a security, at least as it pertains to the public. So I think that what we saw there is a little bit of leeway for Ripple from that perspective. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out further on down the line and what happens on the institutional investing side, etc. At the end of the day, FedNow is going to be utilizing similar technologies to Ripple specifically for, in institutional investing. So that will still be on the classified as a security side of things. And that'll be between essentially the banks and the cross-border payments. So anything that's a payment outside of the US. As far as Coinbase in particular, Coinbase has put themselves in a fantastic position overall. So while there is a ton going on that could be considered FUD surrounding these lawsuits and the way securities are defined, it's important to also note that the naming of Coinbase as the SSAs for the ETFs on the NASDAQ does put Coinbase in a pretty significant position to stay kind of at the top of the heap as far as US regulations go and US exchanges, right? As opposed to where on the flip side of that, we have basically Binance here, that their regulatory struggles within the US don't have as much light at the end of the tunnel as Coinbase has. So if you're looking at those two objectively from an exchange perspective, that's what I would note. Kind of sliding underneath all of that is crypto.com, funny enough, and we'll have to wait and see how things shape out, I think, within the rulings surrounding both Binance as well as the rulings surrounding Coinbase before we start to see kind of the dominoes fall as they may with crypto.com in particular. And we've seen, of course, recently crypto.com changing a ton of their policies, releasing a 52-page end user license agreement, which basically makes me not want to use them at all because I don't have time to read the 52 pages, and some questionable content that I have seen in those pages so far without reading them all the way to the full extent. Bitwise's spot Bitcoin ETF refiling is acknowledged by the SEC. Bitwise's San Francisco digital asset manager refiles the ETF on June 28th. In a noteworthy advancement for the cryptocurrency ecosystem, the Securities and Exchange Commission of the United States has recognized Bitwise's application for a spot Bitcoin exchange traded fund product. According to the SEC notice, which states the notice of filing of a proposal rule change to list and trade shares of the Bitwise Bitcoin ETP trust under the New York Stock Exchange ARCA Rule 8.201-E, commodity-based trust shares, Bitwise's filing has been acknowledged. Bitwise, a digital asset manager based in San Francisco, initially submitted their application for a spot Bitcoin exchange trade fund in October of 2021. However, they made amendments to their application and submitted it on June 28th of this year. This filing from Bitwise comes in the wake of several other institutional applications for similar products, notably sparked by BlackRock's submission for a spot Bitcoin ETF on June 15th. Regarding refiling for the application, Bitwise's Chief Investment Officer Matthew Hogan highlighted the significance of BlackRock's entry into the market, considering their position as the world's largest issuer of ETFs and their meticulous approach to decision making. I mean, I suppose so. Meticulous approach being just as bipolar surrounding cryptocurrency as anybody else, swinging wildly, of course, from being like Bitcoin is crap and it's going to go to zero to now Bitcoin is the new gold. Clear market manipulation by BlackRock and their public-facing communications. According to Hogan, it would be disingenuous to recognize the importance of this signal. However, he opted now to disclose any specific information about a surveillance sharing pertaining to Bitwise's ETF. Now, it is assumed here that SSA, what they're referring to here, that surveillance sharing agreement, would be probably more than likely utilizing Coinbase, because that's what we're seeing being listed for BlackRock. So a refiling here is primarily because what ends up happening is they're trying to basically limit the possibility of manipulation for Bitcoin by partnering with someone that controls a shit ton of Bitcoin, right? Like Coinbase. That is essentially what the idea behind all of this is. In addition, he stated that the most successful spot Bitcoin ETF application will need to include multiple pieces of analysis. These include analysis focusing on the CME market, and obviously surveillance sharing agreements are an interesting idea. Not just an interesting idea, the primary idea that's going to get you to pass the SEC's requirement for such a thing, right? So it's not, in my humble opinion, an interesting idea. It's a necessary idea if, in fact, you want to file for an ETF. I'd like to hear your thoughts and opinions, of course, once again in the live chat, as well as the comment section below. I'm not sure if I really give two flying Fs about an ETF for Bitcoin. I mean, that is putting it into traditional finance. And from the very get-go, Bitcoin is not supposed to participate in that from a principled standpoint, and it's supposed to be a replacement for it. So, you know, we are kind of shoving this wrench into the gears a little bit. And I think it's part of the adoption strategy for companies like, you know, basically BlackRock to be able to have some sort of say within the new digital economy that is quickly approaching, right? Because not only is it pretty clear that cryptocurrencies are here to stay and will be sticking around for quite some time, but we have CBDCs on the horizon coming up as well. But there is a ton of pushback surrounding CBDCs, as well as other threats coming into play, like each individual countries wanting to prop up their own individual currency, and partnership companies trying to come up with some sort of competitor to the US dollar as a reserve. So having some sort of asset that allows you to basically circumvent that, and from the perspective of someone like BlackRock or Bitwise for some sort of hedge against any kind of US dollar failing or whatever it may be, makes a lot of sense. So it's kind of like traditional finance hopping in as a protection mechanism is what I see it as, especially once we started seeing a lot of the kind of new statements coming from basically BlackRock. Now, if you are a customer of Charles Schwab, it's important to note that they have announced a data breach. Oh no. Hold on, I'll fix it. Boom. There we go. Charles Schwab, the parent company of TD Ameritrade, there we go, Incorporated, has disclosed that it is the latest company to suffer a data breach resulting from vulnerabilities found in the MOVEit file transfer software. While the company claims that the computer systems of both companies remains unharmed, customer data stored on Ameritrade's MOVEit server was compromised. The incident is currently under investigation by both Schwab and Ameritrade, with a thorough analysis expected to be completed soon. Upon conclusion, Schwab says affected customers will be notified. This data breach holds significant implications as it contributes to one of the largest breaches of 2023. Affecting millions of Americans, the compromised information puts individuals at an increased risk of identity theft and fraudulent activities. Haha, steal my identity. I have no credit as it is, good sir. I'm a Bitcoiner. It is crucial for customers who receive a data breach notification from TD Ameritrade or Charles Schwab to understand the potential risk and take appropriate measures. The cause of the breach stems from vulnerabilities discovered in the MOVEit software, which TD Ameritrade used on a limited basis. The incident came to light after the software's developers detected a zero-day vulnerability. Promptly responding to the potential security breach, TD Ameritrade ceased using MOVEit and promptly informed law enforcement. Simultaneously, an investigation was initiated to determine the scope of the breach and the specific client data that may have been exposed. Although this investigation remains ongoing, Schwab estimates that approximately 0.5% of Ameritrade's clients may have been affected. That could mean up to 55,000 clients have been affected. In a release, Schwab emphasized its commitment to providing regular updates to clients as new information emerges. Ensuring direct communication with affected individuals, it is anticipated that one of the two companies will issue data breach letters to impacted customers in the near future. Now, from the perspective of like, obviously the cryptocurrency movement and so on, the important part here is if you stick to the principles of cryptocurrency and the fundamentals there, and you have full transparency as well as the ability to participate anonymously within the network, then a lot of these issues go away. However, once we start introducing KYC, known as Know Your Customer, into exchanges and into cryptocurrency as a whole, then these problems start to become more basically come back, right? You have the leaks of these exchanges and your identity is tied to everything. It takes 5 different forms of ID to move anything around in Coinbase, which is absolutely infuriating. And that's pretty much the same across the board with any exchange. We, on the US side of things, have KuCoin now requiring know your customer as well. And so once again, it's kind of this battle between what crypto was supposed to do and the problems that it solved, the obvious problems that are here, like these kind of data breaches that, impact individuals' identities, and the move of cryptocurrency into adopting these same practices that basically negate any of the advantages that cryptocurrency offered in the very first place. Now, let's get into some hardware news. Chinese GPU maker receives investment to develop OpenCL and CUDA compatible chips to tackle NVIDIA. Now, AMD hasn't been able to compete with NVIDIA very well for quite some time now on the Radeon side of things. So does, a new company from China really have the ability to compete? I'm not certain, but a Chinese startup has received investment from the country to develop chips that feature compatibility with NVIDIA's CUDA and OpenCL programming models. Of course, the way this is going to function is the Chinese government's going to dump in a bunch of money, and then this company is going to steal as much intellectual property from NVIDIA as they possibly can and manufacture their own chips. The Shanghai-based startup Danglin was founded in 2017 and has now received funding from the CIIF, China Internet Investment Fund, which was also initiated jointly by the State Cyberspace Administration of China and the Ministry of Finance to develop chips for domestic markets that are both CUDA and OpenCL compatible. The chips will primarily be used for GPU usage, but can be further used in more premium markets such as the high-powered computing and artificial intelligence after their development succeeds. Danglin will be developing their chips on the GPU Plus technology, which is said to offer a software-defined on-chip heterogeneous computing architecture and will support both CUDA and OpenCL, reports John Petty. As for the product lineup, the China-based GPU maker initially unveiled 4 products which ranged from gaming to AI training. The top solution is the Goldwasser chip, which is designed for AI-based compute acceleration and will be getting edge and cloud computing platforms. The UL32 and 64 are 10 to 15 watt solutions, offering up to 64 TOPS of the INT8 and 16 teraflops of the FP16 compute, with support of up to 16 gigabytes of memory and 64 channels of video encoding at 1080p 30 FPS. So these aren't by any means powerhouses, but pretty competitive specifications for the power consumption allotted here, right? 10 to 15 watts. The company states that its second generation GPUs were taped out in 2022, and mass production is expected this year. The new GPUs will deliver a 3 to 5 times performance gain in transformer-based models and greatly reduce the hardware cost and workloads such as ChatGPT and generative AI. Some of the specifications that you can see down here that I find really interesting, of course, is the 4 gig, 8 gig, and 16 gigabyte models at this memory or at this power consumption is quite impressive, meaning that for the mining side of things, if we were talking about potential memory intensive algorithms, which are going the way of the dinosaur faster than I've ever seen here in this new kind of cycle, unfortunately. If that were still the case, though, and we did have, relevant cryptocurrencies that were memory intensive for GPU mining, these could be interesting, right? As it sits now, these aren't going to be interesting on a majority of profitable algorithms due to the increase in requirement for compute. A chip maker that offers CUDA programming capabilities and high-end GPUs for AI processing can be a big deal for China's domestic market. Another thing to mention here is this will be for China's domestic market, so I wouldn't expect to see this outside of China whatsoever without some special deals being cut. While NVIDIA and Intel are both pushing to supply more chips within the country, the accelerators themselves are cut down variants of what is available in other regions due to US-based restrictions. Furthermore, it is becoming harder to acquire these chips due to increasing demand and higher costs with an H800 GPU priced above 250,000 RMB, which is 35,000 US dollars. Currently, there are 13 GPU developers in China, and we will have to wait and see whether Danglin can actually get these chips out in the market or if they will end up with the same fate as BioNTech, who are poised to become a major GPU manufacturer and compete against NVIDIA within the HPC segment, but ultimately saw no progress due to US regulations. The big difference here, of course, though, that what it sounds like to me is the funding is coming from China, different entities within China, the Internet Investment Fund, the Cyberspace Administration of China, and the Ministry of Finance. And it is specifically being allotted for domestic manufacturing. So once again, this is a little bit of a different strategy than what we've seen from these Chinese GPU manufacturers in the past, where they were kind of going outside of the Chinese borders for basically shipping and sales and all of that. Staying within the borders, of course, is going to allow them also as well, in my humble opinion, to be able to be a little bit more flamboyant or free when it comes to intellectual property surrounding NVIDIA GPUs. Now, NVIDIA, though, is launching a very interesting model, not specifically NVIDIA, but Gigabyte, one of their third-party manufacturers or board partners. And it is going to be the first low-profile RTX 4060 GPU. You can see half height here, which is very intriguing, I think, from the perspective of building out, nice server rigs, essentially. But nearly full GeForce RTX 40 lineup from Gigabyte features 3 fans, a principle that is sometimes is hard to understand given that 2 fans would be just as sufficient as 3 for a sub 200 watt model. Only with the launch of the RTX 4060, the company has decided to launch a dual fan option. As NVIDIA enters sub 160 watt territory with their 4060 series, one begins to wonder if there will be any low profile design based on the latest architecture. It turns out that Gigabyte has uncovered one of the first such designs in a long time. The previous low-profile models were introduced for the Radeon 6400 and the 1650 models, which are definitely targeted at the entry-level segment. If it weren't for SKU name, the 4060 with the AD107 GPU and 128-bit bus would be a strong contender as a successor to these cards. However, Gigabyte decided to proceed with their plans regardless of the GPU name. The fact that we are looking at a first triple fan cooling solution for the low profile GPU in the Ada series is worth mentioning. This means that the card will be slightly longer than the mini ITX form factor. However, those who have room for a dual slot and low profile model should be equally excited. In addition, this model features a single 8-pin power connector, which is a common sight on the 4060. Furthermore, it has a non-standard display connector with 2 HDMI 2.1s and 2 DisplayPort 1.4 ports. Many companies simply reduce the display output capability here, but Gigabyte went one step further by stacking them to preserve the original design. One might wonder where such cards will find their use, but home theater PCs and mini ITX systems with optional external GPUs are the first thing that come to mind. Now, obviously for me, first thing that comes to mind is kind of this shift into the proof of useful work and having a low profile model that will slot into a lot of these smaller servers, etc. Could be an interesting potential. I'm not sure that you want to do that with the 4060 series in general, just because of the limited power and some of the, more efficient GPUs that are available for mining across the board, and the low memory availability, or just a low VRAM count, right? Which has been a problem for the 4060 as well, making it more enticing, I think, for a lot of miners to still stick with something like the RTX 3060 over that. Now, Intel has dropped the price, or the Intel price on the Intel Arc A750 has dropped over on Newegg. I've been utilizing these to mine Ergo personally because they are very efficient at Ergo. I was hoping to see some updated improvements for Dynex, but we really haven't gotten there reliably yet. While you can use MMPOS for these particular units, and you can basically kind of cheat it like I covered before, it still just seems to be best to be sitting on Ergo with these particular units. But this past week witnessed a plethora of GPU deals due to the conclusion of Amazon Prime Day and Newegg's Fantastech offers. Anyways, however, with both promotions now over, gamers must redirect their attention to discovering equally enticing deals that will justify their hard-earned money. ASRock aims to address this concern with an offer on the ARC A750 Challenger series. To refresh your memory, the ARC A750 with 8 gigabytes initially launched at $279. It did consequently drop down to $249 in February. But over the past few weeks, AMD unveiled its 7600 at $279. So that was swiftly followed by NVIDIA's introduction of the 4060 at $299. And even with the revised price, the A750 remained an unattractive choice. However, after 5 months, the situation has drastically changed as the ARC A750 now has reached a price at $179 at Newegg. Of course, that will be with the $20 off promo code here, so make sure you keep that in mind. Otherwise, it's $199. I personally haven't checked if there are limits. There probably are limits on the amount that you can order, but this price is coming down to be basically like, this is the cheapest GPU you can get with the most, bandwidth. Right? The biggest bus, the most memory bandwidth, and the most memory on board. Brand new, coming right at you for $179. These are probably not a terrible play. I've already been kind of building out one rig for these. Now with the price drop, maybe we have a little bit more room for this to drop even more. I think this will probably be the final price drop for quite some time though. It is very enticing to me to pick a few more of these up in preparation for, the next cycle. As far as if I'm looking at brand new GPUs that maintain their warranty and have a lot of memory bandwidth, these are enticing. Like I said, though, unfortunately, if I look at the GPU mining market right now, there is not a ton of memory intensive algorithms that or projects that offer some light at the end of the tunnel for GPU miners in general. And the 40 series, with its kind of focus on the core count and that sort of thing, have started kind of blowing everything out of the water as far as profitability because of the type of coins that are being mined. Now, this may be changing too, though, because it's important to note that the coins that are not memory intensive are going to eventually go the way of FPGA and then ASICs, right? We've already seen now we have extremely competitive FPGA performance on Radiant already. While the developer fee is extremely high at 20%, it more than makes up for that when you compare it to a GPU at this given time, with something like an FK33 doing I think it was 2 gigahash a second at 65 watts or something along those lines. So it's we'll have to wait and see. There's two paths that are basically going forward here, and you got the proof of useful work path, and then you kind of got the core intensive mine the shit coin before FPGAs and ASICs take it over. And that's pretty much your only paths for GPU mining right now, at least as I see it, unless I'm missing something and let me know. And from the AI perspective of things, that core count and that core clock and the core performance is a lot more important than it has ever been previously too. So finding something more balanced in your GPU is probably advised. It makes the A750 a really weird choice right now. The price, if this was Ethereum days and we were talking about Ethereum mining, this would be the buy. Hands down, end of story. If Ergo was slated to be extremely competitive coming up into this next bull market, and it's going to be one of the top proof of work mineable coins, then these would be hands down the best option right now that you could purchase brand new. But I don't think that, well, obviously the Ethereum case isn't true at all, and Ergo is really up in the air as far as all of this is concerned. So that's where my reservations surrounding, in particular, the A750 are. But 8 gigabytes of memory with a 256-bit bus is you know, for under $200 is unheard of. It's really good. AMD might be showcasing their 7800 and 7700 series GPUs. Now, this is the 7800 here is slated to have a 256-bit memory bus with 16 gigabytes of memory on board. And that could make this extremely interesting, right? So we have the 7800 XT here, 16 gigabytes, 256-bit bus with the faster memory speed. It's not the full 20 gigabits per second that we see on the 7900 and the 7900 XT, but it is pretty competitive. We are seeing a total bandwidth of 624 gigabytes a second, which is really, really, really good. And the 7700 XT is interesting as well with a 192-bit bus and the same upgraded memory specs, putting the total bandwidth at 468 gigabytes a second. So these would definitely be something to take a look at. Keep your eye out. The launch price is clearly going to be the determining factor as to whether or not these are really worth it. But from the perspective of memory bandwidth, bus width, and all of that versus NVIDIA, they should come in quite competitive from the mining perspective. If only AMD had let us keep modifying the BIOSes. Is that plural for BIOS? Osprey has released a new firmware. Speaking of more mining updates, version N2.0.2 will be released at noon on July 14th. That was actually yesterday. And they solved read temperature issues, fan speed issues, 24-hour notification issues, auto restart issues, and a new web UI design. They integrated hash reactor 0.2.1 and fixed match hash rate issues. They fixed clock unstable issues, and they show FPGA index chip type on streaming log. It supports the API, and you can select find the API listing in the description below. Now, in particular, they will auto update if you do not have the update turned off. And in conjunction with this, they actually have also announced a price drop on the E300 as well as a promo code. My promo code is down below. It will get you $300, taking this unit down to $3,000. Now, the question begged here, of course, is it really worth $3,000? And if we look at the mining calculators, you're probably going to think no, right? If we go into something like Caspa, which is soon to also be taken over by ASICs, if not really arguably already taken over by ASICs at this point, we see essentially a 67.44, or this is wrong one. Let's start over here. We see 5.97 gigahash a second at 172 watts. And that not even calculating in the miner fee, you know, after 10 cents a kilowatt hour, that's $1 a day. You're talking about a 3,000 day ROI on what is arguably, to be completely honest, an older FPGA, right? So, it probably is overpriced. That doesn't mean that Osprey is necessarily overpricing it compared to what they manufactured them for. It means that the nature of this game in mining does put it at a point to where you can, as a manufacturer, as a distributor, anything like that, get stuck with units at a high cost and you have to wait. The question is will these VU33Ps essentially end up being worth it in the next bull run, you know, with the adoption of more and more FPGAs, which does appear to be happening, right? Like with the development that Team Redminer has been doing, there's a lot of light at the end of the tunnel there for individuals that have FPGAs that don't necessarily have personal bitstream developing expertise or anything along those lines. We could see more and more coins being adopted by both Team Redminer and the other projects that are coming out, you know, from Osprey, that sort of thing. But there are things like the C1100 from the FPGA perspective they're going to be, you know, outpowering these things. So the price feels a bit high, not from the perspective of what I think, you know, Osprey, I don't think there's a huge markup, I think is what I'm trying to say. But, you know, a 3,000 day ROI is pretty insane. I mean, we could look at a couple other support. You know, we do have support for Ironfish now, which we have covered before. It's at 67 gigahash a second at 109 watts. Even that's going to cut you down to like 50 cents a day. So you're going to like double your ROI time to like 6,000 days, meaning like, oof, I don't know if that's going to work. The best performance right now is Kyla coin, a fairly new coin with a very limited and low supply. That is at 7.2 gigahash a second at 40 watt, or not 40 watts, excuse me. I think it was 180 watts, 40 megahash. The most efficient is 40 megahash a second per. It's almost $2 a day. So that will cut your ROI time down in half. So that'll be about 1,500 days. What'll be really interesting is if they get a bit stream, you know, that we're starting to see on the FK33s, for example, for Radiant, right? So if Radiant bit streams get released along the way, maybe that does alleviate some of this because of the performance of Radiant here recently. I mean, if we look at, you know, most of the, let's look at like the 4090, for example, Radiant's in second place at this given time. So, you know, if you could get some really, get a really efficient bit stream for that, maybe really your play is Radiant, but you're kind of just playing. I mean, FPGA right now is feeling a lot like GPUs by and large, right? Where it will be, and a little bit worse, right? Because the fact of the matter is that FPGA will kind of always be this middle ground. Like FPGA is just a step in the progression of, you know, mining hardware for any particular unit. So, or any particular coin, right? Or algorithm, right? It typically in the past has always gone CPU to GPU to FPGA to ASICs, right? And that's kind of like the natural life cycle. So playing the FPGA game is definitely playing a very finicky game. And I think like it behooves you to have like the experience of being able to program your own bit streams, keep those in-house. That's why a lot of those end up being in-house. We'll just have to see if that market breaks out and changes anytime soon. I don't know. I'd like to hear your thoughts and opinions on it. Now, in crazy news, but not that crazy really, if we really think about it, we do have Caspa hitting a new all-time high. It crossed 1.9 petahash a second. Absolutely skyrocketing. Most of that was really interesting, I think, in my opinion, was going through F2 pool. The reason why F2 pool is interesting is because a majority of the Ice River ASICs were popping off on, you know, kaspa-pool.org just because of the support level. And now we're starting to see, obviously F2 pool was expected to have a lot of support, but you didn't really have that support from, you know, being able to mine those with Ice Rivers off the bat. So starting to see a pretty hefty increase of hash rate on F2 pool, starting to take up 16% of the network, kind of begs the question of like, what hash rate is coming here? Is this Bitmain now starting to spin up or is it not? We know from third-party retailers that there should be about 5,000 units ready to go by September, I think is what it's looking like for the KS3s from Bitmain. But if we have 5,000 units, we're talking about 40 petahash or something along those lines, where we're only crossing like 2 petahash at this point. Of course, it would be probably a bad strategy to dump all of those onto the network as quickly as possible. And I think Bitmain is probably quite aware of that at this time. So maybe it is just a little bit of a tick up of some testing of that. We are seeing, of course, still about 20% of the network hash rate coming from solo pools. And then if we look at the distribution of coin, we still have about 55% of it going to unknown. So about half of the network, or a little over half of the network, is still going outside of traditional pools. So I have to keep an eye on this. Congratulations to Caspa for the increase. of hash rate. I mean, that is a piece of security. The question is, of course, how many people actually have control of that? The difficulty is skyrocketing as well. It may be time for you to take your FPGAs off of Caspa and place them onto something else. Now, Bitcoin also hit a new all-time high of hash rate, I believe. Let's go ahead and take a look. Not really anything super visible. Kind of odd behavior on the network there as well. Sitting at 387 exahash a second, or 365 exahash a second on the network. So there is that to take a look at. If we look at some of the others, I think Flux is really sticking right around that 1 point. I guess it said, this is interesting. Okay, this is new. So we'll have to actually verify that, I think, right? So let's verify that with 2 miners. I think 2 miners will be the best way to verify this. See what they're pulling. Okay, so we've gone up. Give me longer timeline. Not really. Okay. No, we had that tick up. So it's ticked up a little bit to like 2.5 mega solutions a second, as far as that's concerned. We'll have to wait, of course, for the launch of proof of useful work to really see how this shakes out. Ergo, 18.57 terahash a second, 19.2 terahash a second on the total network. Kind of some crazy rentals maybe going on here. Pulley solo there. K-pool solo. I'd actually be interested in seeing what the nice hash results are on this. That would probably be what we are looking for. Or just do hardware, GPUs. I think they cover nice hash on this one, is why. I'm going here for a quick look. Nice hash kapow. Lots of rentals on nice hash kapow. And that is probably from XNA. Let's go take a look. Relative. Not anything crazy. That hash rate distribution's worrisome, with 49.4% at our plant right now. Something to keep an eye on. Another one that was worrisome, I believe, too, that we mentioned earlier in the week was Dynex, which has 60% of the hash rate on Ecopool. So if Ecopool gets hacked, or there's a bad actor within Ecopool, I mean, it could spell the end of Dynex, quite frankly. Keep an eye on that. ASIC mining profitability, KS3 not shipped yet, delayed August to September. It has come down in profitability quite a bit, all the way down to 2,060 US dollars a day. The KS2 down to 495, almost 500 a day. We have the Antminer L7 still sitting up here at the top because of the merge mining, which makes it extremely profitable. And then we can kind of scroll down from there, look for the S19 Pro like we always do. Where is it? There we go. And let's see, what's it doing? 16 cents a day on Bitcoin Cash, 15 cents a day on Poolin. So I've actually kind of changed a little bit of my mining strategy. We'll talk about that here now. I'm currently utilizing Foreman. I just got my power report. So I'm utilizing Foreman to go ahead and manage my miners. And they shut down for 9 hours a day. So right now you can see that they're sleeping. And if we go to power control, basically I'm utilizing Foreman here to go ahead and power up the miners at 9 p.m. and power down the miners at 12 p.m. And that's kind of keeping me like basically within that spot while they're shut down. You know, it's only showing 238 a day in power costs. Now my power cost calculated per day right now is about $37. If you wanted to say, like, obviously I was saying I'm profitable now. If we look at the past day, for example, it was the past day, or I don't know. Anyway, so I think it was like 50. I have to go look at the payouts again, but we'll just do over the week. If we average $41.67 a day is what I'm making essentially at this time on NiceHash with the ASIC miners. So we're not killing it. We're like making $5 a day, and you know, some of the other costs, operating costs, are not covered, but from a power perspective, we are covered and profitable again. So starting to pay off as far as that's concerned. We'll have to see what happens with the upgrade here, or the increase in hash rate and difficulty. So the last thing that I wanted to mention to you guys over on locals, I did post today. I do have access, or we have some, basically some 184 terahash Antminer S19 or Antminer Hydros available. They are 3,500 each, no minimum order quantity, and the locked power rate is from 1 to 5 years at 8.5 cents a kilowatt hour. Foreman is used for management. They are in Georgia, and I have 50 units available. If you're interested, you can DM me on Twitter or on locals or on Telegram, and we can get those figured out for you. Now, keep in mind, if you want to buy it yourself, that's fine, but you're not going to have a way to cool it. So they can drop ship you one. That's fine. But these are really meant to be hosted. They're already up and running, so they can get pointed to your address today, if you're interested. Let's go ahead and get into questions and answers. Remember, super chats are never required, always appreciated, and first to be answered. Tagging at Son of a Tech will highlight the message orange, and I'll be able to read it that much easier. We already have a few questions already prepped here. So Gandalf said, at Son of a Tech, the same software breach, I think referring to the software breach for Charles Schwab, has also affected some banks, and it doesn't give it out account info, but releases your social security number, address, etc. onto the black market. So there you go. Best defense is a good offense. Destroy your credit, and you won't have to worry about it. Other than that, FE says, ask Tech, how's the training going? No, I haven't been training. I'm dealing with a bunch of health issues, so I haven't been training in a while, but thanks for asking. I've only been doing yoga. RD27 says, is Caspa still the most mined coin by a GPU on Hive OS? We could check that real quick on the Hive on statistics, I suppose. It is showing Caspa most mined still right now at 14%. So the answer would be yes, with Ethereum Classic in second and Dynex in third. Heavy Flavor says, Tech, small question, your take on Threads Twitter clone. I'm looking forward to that MMA fight. And sorry for the black screen as well, guys, early on, but we got it all figured out. All right, well, that's going to wrap it up. I got, well, here's another question. Son of a Rabbit Panda says, are hashes comparable between different algos in terms of measurement? Is 1 hash of Bitcoin equal 1 hash of Caspa? No, it does not. Nope. Hash rates are not equal. Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit the like, comment, subscribe, and notification bell down below. I will make sure our technical difficulties are not repeated next week. Make sure that you're subscribed to the channel for the blocks episodes this week. I only did 3 last week. I'm hoping to do 4 or 5 this next